Have you ever felt like modern life basically leaves you with only two choices?
Oh, I think we all know that feeling.
Right. Like, on one hand, you're relentlessly doom scrolling through these perfectly optimized feeds, just, swiping until your eyes completely glaze over.
Yeah, the endless capture.
Exactly. Or, on the other hand, you feel totally paralyzed, just stuck in this outdated version of yourself, completely terrified to make a move. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely.
It just feels like we are all constantly oscillating between being mindlessly captured by screens or just completely frozen in place.
It's a really profound shared exhaustion, across the board. And the issue is we tend to treat that exhaustion as a personal failing.
Oh, totally. Like, we just aren't trying hard enough.
Right, we tell ourselves we just lack discipline
Hmm.
or, that we need to meditate more or put our phones in another room. We individualize what is actually a massive structural collapse in how human beings are supposed to develop.
Well, that structural collapse is exactly what we are jumping into today. So welcome to today's deep dive. Our source material is a really fascinating 2026 paper by author Boris Krieger.
Yes, from the Institute of Integrative and Interdisciplinary Research in Toronto.
Exactly. And Krieger explores this revolutionary concept developed by Roman Solotowski. It's a method known as the network of events.
It really is a remarkable synthesis. Krieger takes cognitive science, sociology, and the century-old tradition of therapeutic theater.
Which is such an interesting mix.
It is. And he uses them to explain why modern civilization is generating this very specific family of pathologies. But more importantly, he breaks down Solotowski's practical, scalable method for actually curing it.
And that's our mission today. We are going on a deep dive to figure out how this specific framework uses role play and sociodrama to cure our modern societal paralysis.
It's a big goal, but the framework really supports it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand Solotowski's radical solution, we really have to understand the specific structural trap that Krieger says you and I are currently caught in.
Right. So to map out that trap, Krieger introduces a biological baseline. He calls it the exploration imperative.
The exploration imperative. Got it.
In cognitive science terms, your internal self-model, like your idea of who you are, how you react, what you believe, it absolutely must drift and change to survive.
Because the world around us is changing.
Exactly. If the social environment around you changes and your self-model remains static, you accumulate what researchers call prediction error.
Meaning you just don't understand how the world works anymore.
Pretty much. You literally fall out of sync with reality.
Yeah.
Your stress levels spike because your brain can no longer accurately predict social outcomes. So you absolutely have to try on new identities just to remain viable as a person.
But the problem there is that trying on a new identity in the real world is, well, it's incredibly dangerous.
It's a huge risk.
Right. If you suddenly change how you communicate at your job or in your marriage or in your local community, there are severe immediate consequences. Krieger calls these reptilian stakes.
Because your brain registers that social risk as a literal threat to your survival.
Exactly. It's life or death to the brain.
Well, historically, human beings solved this dilemma through what anthropologists call the play frame.
Like actual play.
Yes, but structured. Think of ancient rituals, seasonal carnivals, or even traditional community drama. These were designated, physically bounded spaces where you could temporarily become someone else.
Oh, interesting. So you could be the fool or the king or whatever.
Right. You could play the villain or the outcast, and crucially, there was always an integration phase.
What does that mean, an integration phase?
It was a distinct moment where the carnival ended, the mask came off, and you returned to your normal life. But you returned slightly enlarged, having safely tested a new facet of your psychology without burning your life down.
Man, I look at modern civilization and it feels like we just took a bulldozer to the playframe.
We really did.
We have thousands of high-stakes, consequential roles we have to perform perfectly every day, but there's no designated sandbox to safely experiment in anymore.
And that absence is what Krieger terms the civilizational lacuna. It's a gap. The biological drive to explore doesn't just vanish because the sandbox was destroyed.
It has to go somewhere.
Exactly, it mutates. And this brings us back to that bimodal pathology you described at the start.
Right, the doom scrolling versus the freezing.
Yeah.
It's honestly like playing a highly difficult video game where the safe state feature has been completely deleted by the developers.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because every single action is permanent, right?
Yeah.
And every mistake carries those reptilian stakes, real-world danger. So you react in one of two ways.
Either freeze or you get captured.
Exactly. You freeze and refuse to leave the starting zone because you're terrified of making a wrong move. Or you get captured. You find some meaningless, addictive mini-game in the corner of the map and just play it endlessly. You feel like you're doing something, but you aren't actually risking anything.
What's fascinating here is that this completely rewrites how we view our worst habits. Doom scrolling is not a moral failure.
It's not.
No, it's a structural design flaw of modern society failing to give you a safe sandbox to evolve in. When you lack a play frame, your unmet exploration drive gets hijacked by extractive platforms.
Like social media.
Right. They offer you endless novelty, the dopamine hit of a new post, a new argument. But they intentionally withhold the integration phase.
There's no closure.
None. You
None.
never return to your life enriched. You just keep scrolling because the biological loop is never closed.
Wow. And if you aren't captured by the feed, your outdated self-model just locks up in the freeze response. You develop neuroses, chronic anxiety, and just the suffocating feeling of being stuck.
It is a brilliant diagnosis by Krieger.
It really is. But if the core problem is a missing sandbox, how do we build a new one in the real world? This directly brings us to Roman Solotubitsky and his use of sociodrama.
Yes. So Solotubitsky builds on the foundational work of J.L. Moreno. He was a physician who essentially invented psychodrama back in the 1920s.
Okay, the 1920s, so this isn't exactly a new concept.
The roots aren't, no. Moreno believed that traditional talk therapy was fundamentally incomplete. He argued that just analyzing your problems intellectually doesn't actually change your behavioral wiring.
That makes sense. You can know why you're anxious and still be anxious.
Exactly. He argued that people needed an action space, something he called surplus reality.
Surplus reality. I mean, that sounds a bit esoteric.
It sounds like it, but it is actually very pragmatic. Surplus reality is a constructed space where the unspoken, unlived, or suppressed dimensions of human life can be physically acted out.
Without the real-world consequences.
Exactly. It is the permission to embody the what-if. But what Solotubitsky does is take this concept out of the individual therapist's office and apply it to entire communities.
Oh, wow. So scaling it up.
Right. He shifts the focus from individual trauma to group roles.
So instead of analyzing my personal childhood issues, we are looking at social roles, like the displaced person, or the bureaucrat, or the teacher.
Precisely. In Solotubitsky's sociodrama, these roles don't belong to any one person. They circulate among the participants. Krieger describes this as creating an individualized we.
An individualized we. Okay, so instead of saying, I am the victim and you are the oppressor, the dynamic shifts to, we are exploring the mechanics of oppression together.
Yes, exactly. The role is a mask that anyone in the room can put on.
That is a fascinating shift in perspective.
And we have data on how well it works. The Tomskin-Kazan cascade, detailed in Krieger's book, perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, right, the Russian cities.
Yes. In these cities, there's a complete lack of infrastructure for inclusive education. Children with special needs were isolated. Parents were overwhelmed.
And the teachers probably had no support either.
None. They were entirely untrained for those specific needs, and government officials offered zero support. The entire social ecosystem was frozen.
Everyone was locked in their consequential reality, just defending their own turf.
Exactly. So Solotubitsky arrives, and instead of calling a standard policy meeting or a town hall, he stages a sociodrama.
He literally puts on a play.
He gets a local group together, and they start role-playing a dialogue between a mother of a special needs child and a typical first-grade teacher.
And these are just normal people playing the parts.
Both of these roles are played by ordinary members of the community. And then it starts to cascade. Real teachers hear about it and join in.
Wow.
And eventually, they invite the actual regional education officials to the theater.
Okay, I bet those officials were completely on the defensive.
Oh, highly defensive. They arrived ready with their consequential reality talking points. No budget, no mandate, no trained staff.
The usual bureaucratic shields.
Right. But Solotubitsky didn't ask them to debate at a podium. He brought them into the play frame. He had them step into the roles.
Wait, he made the officials act in the play?
Yes. And by witnessing and engaging in this safe role-play dialogue, the officials' perspectives shifted dramatically. First, emotionally, as they experience the structural deficits from the inside, and then administratively.
That is wild.
It ultimately led to actual, concrete policy changes and inclusive programs being fully funded.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit because acting out a play and suddenly rewriting city policy sounds almost too clean.
It sounds utopian, sure.
Right. Like, how is this fundamentally different from just having a town hall meeting where angry citizens voice their grievances? We have town halls all the time.
We do.
Officials listen to sad stories and absolutely nothing changes because the officials know their boss is watching. They guard their words.
And that is the core difference between consequential reality and the play frame. Town halls are the absolute definition of consequential reality.
Because the stakes are real.
Exactly. When you stand up at a town hall, you are rigidly defending your self-model. The official has to project absolute competence. The citizen has to project righteous outrage.
Everyone is just playing defense.
Right. Every word is a risk. But the play frame suspends reality. It creates the condition for what Solotwitsky calls the dialogue of soloists.
Dialogue of soloists. Meaning what, exactly?
Think of a soloist in a choir who steps forward to sing their internal emotional truth. In normal life, you suppress that internal monologue because of those reptilian stakes we talked about.
Because it's too dangerous to be vulnerable.
Exactly. But in a sociodrama, because you are wearing the mask of a role, you are protected. It operates on identity, not just identification.
Oh, I see.
When an official physically steps into the role of the overwhelmed mother, they aren't just hearing an argument from across a table. They are tasked with voicing that mother's internal monologue.
And because it is just a play, their administrative defense mechanisms drop.
You've got it. They gather around a shared matter of concern and reassemble the social reality together safely.
That makes a lot of sense. The mask basically gives you plausible deniability to speak the truth. But okay, in Tom's King Tizan, this was a localized live event. You get the actual officials in a physical room, you run the sociodrama, and it works. But this brings us to a massive logistical hurdle.
The scaling problem.
Right. How do you cure a civilizational lacuna like a global absence of the play frame at scale? You can't put millions of people in a physical theater.
And this is where Solotwitsky's concept of the network of events transitions from a local therapy tool into a truly scalable delivery organ.
So how does he do it?
Krieger outlines how Solotwitsky designed a digital front end to scale this experience globally. He calls it the story cycle.
And the digital interface for this is so fascinating. From what I read, it operates on a mechanic called doubling by direct speech.
Which is a very technical way of describing something very intuitive.
Right. It essentially looks like a comic strip. You see 3 panels on a screen, maybe photographs or simple drawings of characters in a specific tense scenario.
Yeah.
But instead of a standard comment section where users just argue with each other about the scene, you literally type speech directly into the empty speech bubbles of the characters.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can immediately see how this circumvents the trap of traditional social media.
Oh, entirely. On a normal platform, you're just a spectator broadcasting your rigid opinion, defending your self-model.
But in the story cycle, the interface immediately forces you into asynchronous roleplay. You are putting words into the mouth of a character.
I can see how that bypasses the ego. So the story cycle goes through 3 distinct phases. First is the warm-up.
Correct. The moderator opens a digital scene, and people start filling in those speech bubbles. Conflicting versions of the event collide on this virtual stage.
And then you move into the action phase.
Right, where the moderator might open a separate parallel chat for meta-discussion, keeping the actual character dialogue pure. But the most important part seems to be the sharing or decision phase.
The third phase.
Yes. That third phase provides the critical integration step that doom scrolling completely lacks. The moderator closes the virtual play, and the geographically distributed group has to make a decision.
A decision about what?
They evaluate the digital tension they've just explored and vote on whether they need to take this momentum and meet for an actual live embodied sociodrama game.
But how does a group of strangers on a digital platform safely transition into a physical room without triggering all those reptilian stakes we talked about?
Well, they leverage the shared history they just built. The digital comic strip acts as a low-stakes vetting process.
So by the time they meet, they aren't really strangers anymore.
Exactly. By the time they decide to meet physically, they have already established a baseline of trust. They've witnessed each other's capacity for empathy within the digital play frame. The digital space is the bridge to the physical space,
Here's where it gets really interesting. The platform has embedded features like real-time translation and fine-tuned privacy protocols.
which is huge for global application.
Right. This means you can have people from across different continents playing the same event simultaneously. Krieger points out that you could have people from cultures that are in active, violent conflict participating in the same virtual theater.
The implications for conflict resolution there are staggering.
Truly.
Because of the anonymity in the translation, individuals can safely reverse roles with their actual adversaries in real time
You can step into the shoes of your perceived enemy.
and articulate their fears without betraying your own tribe, because the system protects your identity and frames it purely as an exploration.
It's basically consequence-free empathy. And crucially, the network of events doesn't demand that you abandon your life to join a brand new app ecosystem.
So it integrates into what you're already doing.
Yeah, Solotowski designed it to graft onto existing communities. It embeds into religious congregations, amateur drama clubs, local schools, or corporate teams.
It utilizes the physical infrastructure and baseline relationships that already exist. It maps the play frame directly onto the real world, rather than trying to pull people out of the real world into a walled garden.
While that sounds incredibly efficient, looking at it objectively, I see a really glaring vulnerability here.
The facilitator problem.
Yes. If you are embedding a powerful psychological tool into a local church or a school, a tool specifically designed to lower defenses, surface deep emotions, and alter identities, the moderator guiding that process suddenly holds terrifying leverage.
They absolutely do.
If people are revealing their deepest insecurities in a vulnerable state, that facilitator becomes a single point of failure. It sounds like a perfect breeding ground for a cult.
You have identified the single most dangerous vulnerability of any therapeutic or highly cohesive community.
Right. It seems so risky.
When a facilitator successfully guides people through intense emotional role play, they naturally accrue an enormous amount of power and trust. Historically, many well-intentioned experimental communities have fallen victim to charismatic gurus.
It happens all the time.
Krieger defines this exact risk as extractive capture.
Meaning the facilitator becomes the star, the emotional center of gravity, and the group stops exploring and just starts orbiting that one person's ego.
Precisely. To neutralize this, Krieger breaks down the anti-extraction by sociometric reselection theorem.
That was quite the title.
It is a mouthful, but it is brilliant. It is a protocol mathematically and structurally designed to make cult formation impossible. Solotowski deploys the network in 4 phases: seed, graft, release, and horizontal connection.
Okay, let's look at the graft phase 2, because that's the engine of this anti-cult mechanism, right?
Yes. To prevent extractive capture, the group utilizes something called sociometry in motion. They mathematically block what Krieger terms censor degradation.
Sensor degradation. Let's define that for a second.
Sure. In any group, the censor is the collective intuition and critical thinking of the members. It's their ability to accurately read the room and assess dynamics.
It's like a group gut feeling.
Exactly. When a charismatic leader takes over, the group's censor degrades. They stop trusting their own perceptions and simply defer to whatever the guru says is true.
So how do they mathematically block that degradation?
They rotate the facilitator every single session.
But they don't use a random lottery, right? Which would be dangerous because you don't want someone completely unequipped handling a sensitive emotional exercise.
No, random is bad. Instead, they explicitly vote at the start of every session on who should hold the frame today. And they vote based on rotating orthogonal criteria.
Orthogonal criteria, what does that actually look like in practice?
Orthogonal means the metrics are statistically independent, they don't overlap. So one week, the voting prompt might be, who holds the most mutual trust in the group today?
Okay, so the group maps out their sociometric web of trust, and the person at the center facilitates.
Exactly. But the next week, the criterion is completely different. The prompt might be, who is most intensely fired up about the theme of today's scene?
Oh, I see.
The person who represents stable trust is rarely the same person who represents disruptive passion.
That is brilliant. It is like a lock where the shape of the keyhole physically changes every time you try to open the door.
That's a perfect analogy.
If you have an aspiring guru who tries to centralize authority by playing the role of the wise elder, they might win the trust vote once. But when the criteria shifts to who is the most chaotic and creative today, the wise elder is structurally locked out.
Exactly. The protocol forces the group to constantly reevaluate each other and shift the center of power.
The mechanism of power dissolves and reformats every time they meet. It is impossible to build a cult of personality under those conditions.
And as the group masters this in phase 3, the release phase, the original master trainer who introduced the system completely departs.
Leaving them to run it themselves.
The group runs the protocol entirely on their own. Finally, in phase 4, horizontal connection, they network digitally with other local groups to share insights.
Which prevents their specific local practice from becoming an isolated, dogmatic echo chamber. So, what does this all mean? We have covered immense ground today. We started with the realization that modern society has trapped us in a bimodal pathology.
The doom scrolling or the freezing.
Right. We are either doom-scrolling our lives away, seeking novelty, or we are frozen in anxiety, entirely because civilization paved over the historical playframe. We lost our sandbox.
We lost the designated spaces to safely practice adapting our self-models to a rapidly changing world.
But Boris Krieger's exploration of Roman Solotowski's network of events shows us how to get that safe space back.
It scales the profound, perspective-shifting power of sociodrama through a digital interface.
It bridges it back into physical communities and protects those communities from cult dynamics using mathematical sociometric voting. It is a powerful reminder to you, the listener, that your endless urge to scroll might not be a lack of discipline.
It might just be your brain begging for a safe place to creatively evolve.
The cure for our societal paralysis is not gathering more data, and it is certainly not subjecting ourselves to more optimizing algorithms. It is finding a way to get back into the sandbox together.
It is about finding a way to play safely with who we are becoming without the constant fear of reptilian stakes.
Absolutely.
And, looking toward the future, Krieger touches upon one final provocative direction for the network of events that raises a profound question.
Oh. What's that?
He notes that the digital platform's architecture is perfectly suited to utilize large language models as auxiliary egos.
Meaning the stand-in roles, the characters you're typing dialogue for and role reversing with, could be dynamically generated by AI.
Yes. Moreno and Solotowski prove that our entire identity is shaped by the people we encounter and the roles we safely reverse with.
Okay.
So what happens to human psychology when the stranger you deeply empathize with, the adversary whose shoes you step into during the network of events, is an artificial intelligence?
Oh, wow.
If we use AI to safely stage our most painful, intractable human conflicts, will stepping into the mind of a machine make our empathy more artificial? Or, by giving us a perfectly safe, infinitely patient mirror to explore our deepest flaws without judgment, will it somehow make us profoundly more human?
Will the ultimate playframe, the space that finally cures our civilizational lacuna, be hosted by an algorithm? We turn to screens to numb ourselves because the real world has no safe states. But what if the screen becomes the exact place we finally learn how to save ourselves? That is something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.